Filbert. She had Stewie Brad. Jamie Filbert is a growing light from a distant star that fully embraces her shadow. Multidisciplinary artist and educator for over 2 decades, martial artist, researcher, scholar, curator, sister, auntie, lover, mentor, friend, a blessed child of our ancestors, and a generator of all things creative. Jamie is a Boer woman, a warrior woman of Kalinda. In 2019, she founded the Filbert Kalinda Technique for Dance and Performance, which is rooted in the tradition and culture of Trinidad and Tobago's sacred martial art form. Kalinda and serves as an artistic safe house and vehicle for this African Caribbean ancient futuristic technology. This initiative is supported by and co-created with master martial artist Rondell Benjamin, founder of the Boer Academy of Trinidad and Tobago, and the transitioned legendary Boer King, King David Matthew Brown. The PKT dance and performance technique has been taught at a number of undergraduate and postgraduate programs to universities and cultural institutions throughout Trinidad and Tobago, North America, and Europe. In 2021, Jamie was named a Caribbean Regional Woman Game Changer, dominated in her respective field by Luke News Caribbean. As a martial artist, she trains in combative, Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, rope, jab, whip fighting, stick, gill pin, and piper studies. Her artistic works are rooted in the quantum archaeology of extrasomatic praxis, or allowing spirit to curate the space from which the art comes and where it is destined to be through cycles of memory, play, dream, language, reconfiguration, and the limbs, soul, and heart of the art. Jamie is the founder of the Art on Purpose, a multifaceted organization delivering social and cultural awareness through professional creative arts and education. She currently serves as pointer of Boer Academy of Trinidad and Tobago, where the work is focused on the veneration, immersion, propagation, and archiving of Kalinda, its ancestors, and living practitioners. Jamie believes in the power of the art and its ability to heal and create dynamic change. She dedicates all of her movement and magic to the legacy of her transition parents, Dennis and Veronica Filbert, and all of her ancestors. Pastor Ingrid Ryan Rubin. Pastor Ingrid Ryan Rubin is a pastor and senior mother at St. Cecilia Spiritual Baptist Church and Healing School, Faizabad. Pastor Ryan Rubin is Principal Associate of the Academy of Grace Institute of the Holy Spirit, which is an institute for spiritual development operational since 2007. Pastor Ryan Rubin is also a theologian trained at the Seminary of St. Vianney and the Ugandan Martyrs, who continues to seek to empower especially spiritual Baptist practitioners with knowledge of the source of their spiritual essence. An ardent researcher, Pastor Ryan Rubin continues to study, write, and publish books about the spiritual Baptist faith and its traditions. Pastor Ryan Rubin holds a master's degree in public management, summa cum laude, and a bachelor's degree in social work, upper second class honors, and theology, first class honors, from the University of the West Indies, St. Augustine. She also has extensive knowledge of the Spanish language, having studied and lived in a Spanish-speaking country for a number of years. Pastor Ryan has several publications: Cobalt, The Blue Zone, published in 2020, Womb Man, God's Plan for Women, to be released in 2022, and My Shepherd, Psalm 23, for teenagers, that was written in 2017. Pia Ajay Bernard, born Alison Bernard in the Western Peninsula of Trinidad and Tobago, in the suburban village of Diego Marte. This multi-talented woman is a performance artist known in that arena as Empress Ajay, producer and talk show host of The Feminine Drive, and also an Ifa Orisha devotee. Since receiving full Ifa initiation in 2015 under the hands of Araba Olatunji Muyiwa Somoron of Nigeria, she carries the Yoruba name of Ajay Tunmobi Ajay, as she's fondly called, is the daughter of a housewife and former steel band captain, both of Diego Martin. She presently resides in East Trinidad in the village of Aruca. And this evening, we are supposed to have a special guest who is Brent Crossan. He's the Associate Professor, Department of Religious Studies at the University of Texas at Austin. He is a socio-cultural anthropologist of religion, secularism, and politics. His research has focused on contestations over the limits of legal power, science, race, and religion in the Americas. His first book, Experiments with Power, Obeah, and the Remaking of the Religion in Trinidad, is published with the University of Chicago Press, 2020. I now hand you back over to Ms. Woodman, and she will direct from here on. I do need to say that if you have questions, please hold your questions to the end, or you can put your questions in the chat if you are on YouTube or if you're on the Zoom, you can put it in the chat and we will take your questions from there. If not, at the end of the presentation, what we will do, we'll ask you to show your hand and we will unmute you so that you can go ahead and ask your question. So please hold your questions to the end of the presentation. Good night again.
So thank you very much, Shepherdess. So we'll just go straight into our discussion at this time. So we invite our panelists.
Folks, thank you very much, folks. I will start the ball rolling this evening, okay, with my presentation on, and host, please give me permission to share my presentation. Okay, make me co-host so I can share my presentation, please. And so, okay, folks, welcome. And so we're going to start our discussion on Obeah. Okay, and so I'm starting by asking the question. Obeah, what is it? You know, we start when we use this word, we seem to fall into a dark place and we get scared and frightened. And so as we allow knowledge to light our way, let us explore what Obeah is, and I want this this discussion is to think up in our minds, what is our definition of Obeah? What do we see Obeah as? I know people have come here to hear what I think Obeah is, what Ajay thinks Obeah is, what Jamie thinks Obeah is, or what somebody else might think. But I want us to consider, to draw one conclusion and probably write a little note down. What do I define Obeah as? And then I ask the question, is Obeah what they have told us it is? Is Obeah what we have been made to believe it is? Whatever that is, I don't know what it is for every individual person, but whatever it is, I want us to ask, is it what they told us it is? And is it what we have been made to believe it is? Of course, the definition depends on who defines the word. Who defines it will determine the definition. So it depends on what perspective we take Obeah from. Somebody called me and told me, I want to come to this discussion because people have been working Obeah on me all my life and I want to hear about it. I got as excited as she did. Obeah, let's talk about Obeah. And so the Merriam Dictionary defines Obeah as sorcery. And we all understand what sorcery is. Okay, what is defined as sorcery? Black magic. I ain't saying white magic, black magic. Okay, something evil. Ebenezer Morgan White of the Eastern Caribbean Digital Archive, he defines Obeah as power, a belief, an African tradition. Or Obeah is a magical art of resistance. Obeah, a religious practice based on a combination of multiple religions. So we already seen from the beginning of this discussion that depending on who you are, where you sit, what vantage point you have, you see it in a different way. You define it differently based on your experience with the word and based on your experiences around the word. Okay? And so, you know, like my reference always comes, I always find references in the Bible. And I reference the Gospels. And each Gospel writer gave a witness statement of the time they worked with Jesus. And of course, what they said in those witness statements had a lot to do with their vantage point, where they were, what kind of relationship they had with Christ. And so people ask, how come John's this account is different? It's just like if all of us went to witness an accident. We all witnessed the same accident. But I was on a top balcony looking down. You were down the road. And I was right behind the car. Somebody was on the other side of the road. I was right in front of the car. Each one of us see the same thing differently because we saw it happen from different vantage points. And so when you talk about what Obeah is, how we define it has a lot to do with our experiences, who we are, what is our history, okay, or what has the world told us about it. And so let us define Obeah. And I know in a lot of people's mind, the first definition, the first thing coming out, no matter what she said, is an evil thing. That's the first thing we say. This is evil, nothing else but. Okay, so let's dive a little deeper. So what does the encyclopedia.com say Obeah is? It defines it as a highly charged and ambiguous term that refers to various forms of spiritual power occurring primarily in the Anglophone Caribbean, meaning in the English-speaking Caribbean, of course, as well in Suriname, okay, which began as an English colony. It is one of the most widespread words of African origin to be found in our region, the word Obeah. And I asked myself, why it's so popular in the Caribbean, particularly in the English-speaking Caribbean, that particular word, and it's so widely used. So what is Obeah? Like voodoo in the Francophone Caribbean, and I know some people when they hear that voodoo, they hear in, what's this gentleman's name? Club 700, I think, is the people. It's a Christian organization. And they say that is the most evil thing that could happen in the world, voodoo, and all that the Haitians do. And that is why things come at them. That's why they always have all these disasters, because they practice evil through voodoo. So like voodoo in the Francophone Caribbean, its various meanings of Obeah continue to shift in significance. And its different valuation over time mirror unresolved tensions between the colonial and the indigenous. So that I have a definition of Obeah that the colonists, that is different from the colonists. It depends on who we are. Those of us who agree that we were uncivilized people in the Caribbean need to be civilized, and then those who said, but we have always been people. We are in this place we're talking about. So as part of this ongoing dialectic, definitions and understandings of the term continue to carry a strong moral charge. A strong moral charge, either negative or positive. Meaning that if you practice in Obeah, you have to be the evilest thing, that what you're doing can't be right. If you're not, okay, and so it continues to, particularly in the Caribbean. I mean, if you go to Jamaica, they have very strong viewpoints on what Obeah is. And of course, it also varies depending on our ethnic background, our social class, okay? Those who use what is called Obeah and the context of how it is used. And so the next question asks, what is the source of our understanding of the word Obeah? Okay, and I know all of us have some level of understanding of it who are in this discussion tonight. So if our definition is a product of our upbringing or a product of our experiences, and so that's what I want us to think about. This is the kind of session I want us to have. I want us to think about that in our minds. Where did I come up with the idea of what Obeah is? What did I read in a dictionary? Did I learn it in school? Was it in a history class? Was it because my neighbor was a Baptist and they say she used to work Obeah? Is that how I come to understand the term? Where did my understanding of this come from? Because I hear people say that. Because I live in the Maruga corridor. Okay. Where did it come from? Did I read it in a book? Is that what the history books are saying to me? What is it a product of? And it is important for us to think about those things. Where did we acquire the ideas we associate with Obeah, whatever those ideas are? That's what I want us using about this evening. Where did those ideas come from? You see, because this discussion is not so much for us to tell, for us to come and tell, but for all of us to explore what we think about this word, what does this word mean for us, and where did we come up with that idea, those ideas around it. And it's also perhaps important here to explore the origin of the word Obeah and its uses over time. Okay, Obeah, the root word for Obeah is Obi, an African word. Sometimes spelled Obi, Obeah, Obeah, is a system of spiritual healing and justice-making practices developed among enslaved West Africans in the West Indies. Now, where I get that from? Some people are saying, well, Obeah is evil thing, or what's she talking about? Remember, the word is an African word. And so if you want to understand the meaning of the word, you have got to go back to the root of the word to understand what it means. That's how you, and that's how you clarify it. Okay, how we interpret it. Today, we have to talk about the circumstances that brought us to the place where we interpreted, where we may have interpreted the word differently. But to find the meaning, we need to go back to the origin. Okay, developed among is a system of spiritual healing and justice-making practices. And so we will talk about some of those justice-making practices that were developed among the enslaved West Africans in the West Indies. Okay, so that people would have come out of Africa. Of course, when you come to the Caribbean, you don't leave your Africanness behind. Wherever we go in the world, okay, wherever we go in the world, when we go to certain places in the world, there is a Chinatown. Chinese who came from China, they've created a Chinatown. In that area, there are Chinese food, Chinese designs, we have people talking Chinese. When people come, they come with somebody's mic is on. They come with who they are. When we came here, we came with our very African selves, those of us who came here as Africans. When we came here as East Indians, we came with our East Indian self. And we came and met people who were already here. When the Europeans came with their European self. And they met people who were already here, who were already, okay, had established their own culture in this part of the world. And that is why it is difficult to define Obeah, because it's not a single unified set of practices. It's not single and unified. It is not an organized system. Sorry. Yeah, it is not a single organized system. Okay? And so that it is important for us to understand that the word Obeah was historically not often used to describe one's own practices. So nobody has said, I am an Obeah man or Obeah woman, I has practiced Obeah. You don't find that. There may be people, and when you hear say I am an Obeah man or an Obeah practitioner, a lot of the times it's bluster. It's people who really don't know what they're talking about, who want to make people feel that they could do things. Okay, but generally, historically, it is not often used to describe. People don't describe what they do as Obeah. Now, Obeah is similar to other African diaspora religions. Here's what we're saying. We're talking about Obeah now as a religious practice, as a way of practicing a spiritual connection with the Supreme Being. Okay, such as Shango. It's similar to Shango and Orisha, Palo, Haitian, Voodoo, Santeria, and Hoodoo, in that it includes communication with ancestors and spirits and healing rituals. Okay, it includes those things. Communication with ancestors and spirits and healing rituals. And I know that people talk to me about, was it that we should people deal with ancestors. And I remind my colleagues of the Christian faith, so do Christians. We always refer to the ancestors. Paul, come along after, he talked about Moses, Jacob, Abraham. They all over the Bible, all over the and the New Testament. Okay? And we are supposed to remember our ancestors. You know, while I was doing this, I remember what came to me was when we talk about, because I know when people who are involved in African-based religious practices, and the spiritual Baptist is an African-based Christian spiritual practice, we think that something shouldn't be done. But I want to remind us that when Jesus, and this is for my Christian brothers and sisters this evening, when Jesus went on the Mount of Transfiguration, his ancestors appeared. Remember? His ancestors appeared. And the guys who were with him says, well, better we build a monument to them. And he told them, okay? When he was on the Mount of Transfiguration, they appeared. And what do ancestors appear to do? To confirm you in your spiritual way. Nevertheless, it differs from, of course, Obeah from religions like Voodoo or Santeria or Orisha, in that it has no explicit canon of gods or deities that is worshipped. And we know that in Orisha there is a canon of gods. There's Shango and others. I'm sure that Ajay will talk about them this evening. They have a canon of gods. You know, and I was having a discussion with my new friend, author and associate professor at the University of Texas, Austin, Texas, Brent Crosson, and we're talking about those things. You know that we use a lot of what we have heard without experiencing it to determine and to define what a thing is. Okay, and the conversation we were having, I remember it came to me clearly that I have always marveled at how the Orisha faith, the Shango, what we call Shango, was able to use the Catholic Church and all its deities and all its saints and turn them into Orisha gods, Orisha saints, ancestral, and you see that, and that happened in Brazil, it happened in Cuba, it happened in Haiti, it happened in Venezuela, it happened in as I talk about Haiti, in the Spanish-speaking world. Okay, they were able, they went to the Catholic Church, but those saints became, they had a parallel name, a name that was parallel in their pantheon of gods. And so that the practice is generally an individual action. That is the practice of what is defined as Obeah. It's really an individual action rather than part of a collective ceremony or offering. Because really Obeah is really a way of doing things. It's really a way of doing things. And we'll come to that, what I mean by a way. It's not it is how you operate, and that is why what we do in African-based faith traditions resembles some of what is described here. Now, variants of Obeah are practiced in the Caribbean, in most Caribbean nations, in Bahamas, Barbados, everywhere, in this region where we were all where Africans were brought as slaves: Barbados, Belize, Dominica, Grenada, Guyana, Jamaica, St. Lucia, St. Vincent, the Grenadines, Suriname, Turks and Caicos, Trinidad. All these are, as well as by the Igbo people of Nigeria. And in some cases, aspects of these folk religions have survived through syncretism and Christian symbolism and practice that was introduced by Europeans. And what I mean by syncretism, the spiritual Baptist faith is one of those, a syncretic faith tradition. Because one of my favorite description of how we Africans who came into the Caribbean accepted Christianity, my favorite description is, we accepted it with our calabash. What do I mean by that? And I discussed this 2 nights ago or last night. We accepted Christianity with our African body, our African understanding of spirit, our African response to spirit, our African relationship with spirit, because we're talking about the Holy Spirit here. That's how we see it. Okay, we talk about, and so that in order for, remember that spirit connects with spirit. When we worship God in spirit. In spirit. It's how we worship God, in spirit. That's how we are led. And so when Christianity came to spiritual Baptists, to African people who were in the Caribbean, okay, through the Baptists who came out of London, and then the Baptists who came through the Americans, we accepted it with our African selves. And so there's a lot of syncretism. So you will find that while we are practicing Christians who manifest our relationship with Christ in a very Africanized way. And that's what we mean by syncretism. In that we have brought both of them together. Obeah is power, another description. Okay? Obeah is power. It's an African tradition, a human tradition. Obeah is Egyptian, it's Ashanti, it's Hebrew, it's Jamaican. And so depending on where you are, that's how people define it. Many statements can describe Obeah, but all will only touch upon small facets. They are the reflective faces of a diamond. That's the description. We see only what is shown back if we gaze into the face. They are the what? The reflective faces of a diamond. And what is Ebenezer Morgan White saying? He's saying that what they have defined as Obeah is practices that came out of the collective African experience, okay? The collective African being that came into the Caribbean. Remember that, and the spirit has memory, and our bodies have memory, okay? And so that sometimes without thinking, you respond to a particular thing without even understanding why you're responding that way, why you feel it inside of you. And it is because of who we are and where we have come from. And he says, we see only what is shown back if we gaze into one face. If we gaze into one face. And I say, and that face is the African face. Why do I say the African face? Because the African man was the first man, the man of the earth. The man of the earth. And I'm not saying this because I'm African, I'm saying this because all historians have already proven that. It's been proven over and over that the first man who was born out of the earth, as what we believe as Christians, came out of the earth, was an African man. And that first man has grown and developed and become and morphed into all kinds of the various types of man. But the origin was the African man. And so that where did the idea of Obeah as evil and bad and witchcraft come from? Where did it come from? Where we get at, if we say that Obeah is a religion, Obeah is a way of seeing things, Obeah is a spiritual interpretation, okay, a ritual, it is all these things. Where did the idea that Obeah is evil come from? And so to answer this question, we must take a look again at Ebenezer's the definition of Obeah. Ebenezer says, Obeah is resistance. Obeah was the response to slavery. It was this resistance that emitted the response of the slave master. Resistance, because it was having the secret to control or to do things in the spiritual realm that will affect people in the carnal realm, in the real, in the day-to-day life realm, having the ability to do that. Okay, that is what, and so that when you look at the history of slave rebellion, and we just have to look at the history of Haiti, okay? A lot of the slave rebellions came from, were people who had spiritual power, okay? And the people who were able to our good old friend, Tubally Bus Butler. Those of us who are Trinidadians know the story of Butler, okay, who was a spiritual Baptist. And when the police was looking for him, the people say he used to disappear. They couldn't find him. That he'd be right there, and when they look, he's not there. And they believe he was a practitioner of what today we call Obeah. Those spiritual arts, that ability to hide, to use your spirit power to be able to hide from the enemy, to be able to resist the enemy, to be able to affect in a negative way the enemy. While the Obeah man was a title given to all practitioners of Obeah, keeping in line with its inclusive and resistance-based nature, Obeah was practiced by both men and women, regardless of age, initial social status, or location. For many, the gift of Obeah, that is the ability to have premonitions or to be inclined to heal, is hereditary. And this is an important point I want us to take note of, okay? And here we're talking about Obeah as a gift. We're going to come to how come it get a bad name, how come it get, we say what it is. And we get so scared when we hear the name. And we use the meaning that we have developed over time to the name. But Obeah was a gift. It was the ability to have premonitions. People went to people who could do that, who could tell them what is happening with them, what's happening with their life, tell them that they're sick, who could find a medicine to fix you, who could tell you where you must go and what you must do, what has happened to you. Okay? And so that if you know the history of a lot of spiritual Baptists, and I like to talk about my faith tradition, a lot of people, we were the community fixer. We were the community healers. Okay, so that mothers and leaders in spiritual Baptist mothers and a lot of communities were the people, a lot of people went by for healing, okay, for counsel, for guidance, for helping them fix something that was going wrong in their lives, okay? And the fact that, and so what researchers have noted is that a lot of people who have these premonitions, these powers of healing, it is usually hereditary, comes in a family line. Like Aaron was a priesthood, the Levites was a family line of priests. Okay, and so what has been, researchers have noted is that it also comes with, it is also part of what you see as healers. Like when I look at the Catholic Church, for example, a lot of families become priests or become, okay? And you see that in particular in the spiritual Baptist faith as well, where a lot of families have managed churches over time. Not meaning that other people have not been called, but that has been part of the history of the tradition. And so Obeah is a gift. Because the ability to have premonitions or to be inclined to heal is a gift, a spiritual gift. And what do we do with spiritual gifts? We give, we share, we heal, we bring peace, we bring harmony, okay? Or we fight evil. That is what the gift of Obeah is, to fight evil, to bring healing. The gift of Obeah is the knowledge and the use of certain plants and animals and products to heal illnesses. That is what Obeah was, to be able to do that. Of course, people thought it was magic. The art of casting spells, of course, warding off evil, conjuring of luck and wealth, the protection of oneself and others. It is what the gift was, what the gift is. So that those who do that really practice in Obeah. The gift of Obeah is the key to freedom of mind and body. And now we know why they outlawed it. Do we know why we fear it? Healing, premonition, guidance. Why we are so afraid of it? Because the powers that be at the time made practicing Obeah a crime. As early as 1800s, the authorities in Trinidad sought to outlaw a practice they call Obeah. And what is the most interesting thing about the research is that they couldn't define what it was. They couldn't define it. What was this thing? They say that they describe it as suspicious activity. Okay? Because what they saw was that the people who were supposed to have been powerless had power. Because they were able to cure illness, they were able to ward off evil, they were able to hide. And so the ordinance of Governor Picton in Trinidad in June of 1800 did not describe who was an Obeah. Instead, the law identified the tools of the trade as being illegal. So amulets and whatever they call, and they describe it as all the customary attributes and ingredients of the profession, but they couldn't define it. All they knew was that it impacted them negatively. And so as early as 1800, they began to stain the word Obeah, to stain any practices that had dealt with healing and guidance for people, and turn it into a bad thing, into an evil thing. The government found a way to reintroduce, and then after emancipation in 1838, the government found a way to reintroduce these slave codes in the law after emancipation. In Trinidad, and not only in Trinidad, in St. Vincent, in Grenada, in Jamaica. In fact, the law is still on the books in Jamaica. True, in Trinidad, it was through the Summary Offences Act. And that continued the damage. Because remember what it does, when it becomes a criminal activity, then you become a criminal. Whoever is practicing those arts become a criminal. Okay? Because now whatever, and when you look at the laws, when you review the laws, when you review the ordinance, they couldn't define what they call Obeah, except that they convinced people that it was evil and that it was unlawful, and they refer to all the accoutrements around it. Okay, this law was only repealed in Trinidad in 2000 after pressure from the Obeah Pact. Led the wave. Okay, it was repealed in 2000 after pressure was put on by Pull and Springer and their group. They put pressure on the government to make that, to change that. But we're talking, what, 22 years ago? And the Prohibition Ordinance of 1917, which banned spiritual baptists. That holiday that we commemorate, okay? The spiritual baptists also became a target for the governor and the government. Okay, so after the law in the 1800s, in 1900s, we're talking about, I was born in 1959, in the 1900s, they create this draconian measure that was intended to destroy our faith tradition. That ordinance of 1917, its intention was to destroy. Because what they wanted to do was destroy any semblance of African spirituality that survived the tsunami that was slavery. And slavery was a tsunami. Slavery was a tsunami. Okay? And what did I mean? Because it robbed African people of the sense of self. It robbed them of their understanding of who they are, and was almost able to obliterate the Africanism. Some people it has been. Okay? And the intention with the 1917 law was to take the rest away. African spirituality, they wanted to destroy any semblance of African spirituality that had survived the tsunami that was slavery, to convince a people that the power that lies in them is evil. To convince a people that the power that lies in them is wicked. To convince a people that the power that lies in them is sorcery, is to conquer them. When you convince them that, you conquer them. And today we have a lot of people who are totally conquered. who are afraid of anything that resembles African manifestation of spirit. And so that you see, when you conquer the mind, it's easy to control the body once you control the mind. Okay, and so that, and this law was repealed, as I said, in 1952. And important for us to notice the impact. I want us to remember that some people say, well, the Prohibition Ordinance of 1917 was also part of these draconian measures intended to destroy any semblance of African spirituality that survived. Okay? And so the question I ask is, are we ready to let go of the shackles that have separated us from our essence? I want us to think about that. Are we ready to let go of those shackles that have separated us from our essence? You know, some of us feel things that we don't understand, and because we have been robbed of the understanding of it. And that is why I think that, you know, I got a chance just to briefly look at Brent Crosson's book, you know, and he talks about Obeah as a technology of justice making. I find this question very interesting. Crossan wrote a book called Experiments with Power, Obeah and the Remaking of Religion in Trinidad. And just by my early glance of what happened here, I am excited. And because he himself, he says in his book on page 45, on the religion and violence, the actual practices of spiritual workers that get called Obeah could be labeled as healing and protection. Okay? Yet the spiritual workers I knew also saw their own work as counteracting the harmful Obeah of others. And in the context of problem-solving work, one person's healing could easily become another's harm. Obeah carries this instability of healing, harming. I think that's an excellent concept. Okay? Healing, harming. And I want us to think of, those are some of the questions I want to raise for us to think about. Are we ready to let go of the shackles that have separated us from our essence? That thing that help us to, because it is that same essence that help us to survive slavery. Otherwise, we weren't supposed to survive. We weren't supposed to survive. And it is that strength and courage that came from there, from inside of us, that allowed us to be able to survive. When you look at the brutality of slavery, I always ask the question, how did we survive? And so I ask now, what are your answers? Because really, this is about, not about what I have to say, it's about what you think. What is going on in your head? What are you conjuring in your minds? When you hear, because that's what I want you to think about. Where did I get my definition of that word from, boy? Where did it come from? I wanted to think back. Think about all the experiences you have had, where you've read it in a book, whatever, what somebody has said to you. I want us to think about that. And then I want us to suss it out and see, and because we need to figure out, you see, it is only when we figure that out, we are able to move forward beyond and to be able to embrace my understanding or some of the things that I'm raising here this evening. Okay, so I want you to think about that and think about your answers. We will come to that after. Thank you very much, folks. This is the end of my presentation. I want to hand you back over to the moderator, to the master. Our next. Yeah, thank you.
So Pastor, could you stop sharing your screen? So, great, wonderful. So our next panelist, practitioner Jamie Filbert and Pia Ajay Bernard, and their discussion this evening would be, how do you define Obeah and how has the definition and understanding of Obeah shaped your understanding of your African spirituality and practice, as well as in relation to other faith-based practitioners in Trinidad. So I want to introduce you to practitioner Jamie Filbert.
Greetings. Can you hear me, everybody? I hope that you can hear me. All right.
Yes, we can hear you,
Yes.
fine.
My name is Jamie. Okay, good. My name is Jamie Filbert. I am a practitioner of Kalinda, which is better known as stick fighting in Trinidad and Tobago. Kalinda is a complex that contains martial dance, drumming, call and response chants or prayers that are called lavways, rituals, and stick fighting. Our complex also includes not just stick fighting, but gilping, which is cutlass fighting, and also whip fighting. So I want to start by giving thanks to the ancestors of Kalinda, to my own mother and father, Dennis and Veronica Filbert, all the practitioners who have passed on into the ancestral realm, and I'm going to chant this bongo song. We going home to Africa tonight, Zimbabwe calling. We going home to Africa tonight. We going home to Africa tonight, Nigeria calling. We going home to Africa tonight. We going home to Africa tonight, the Congo calling. We going home to Africa tonight. So I'm not sure if we're going to be able to see that screen. That was a bongo song. If you understand what the bongo songs were about, we understand we have just started inside of the ancestral realm. I wanted to speak to you all today about Obeah Yawanga, or obeying Yawanga. Is it possible to get Kimberly to share my screen? If not, it's okay. I can do it without it. Okay, I'm not doing it, so I will go through. Got it. So, the call and response of African spiritual technology. Meaning beholds the measure between peace and war, good and evil, right and wrong. So essentially, I'm starting off with giving you what my definition or definitions that I've come across in reading about what Obeah is and what Wanga is. Obeah equals deeds, actions, and a demonstration of life. Wanga, W-A-N-G-A, equals the word, your mental intention, and meaning. So what Obeah, as Pastor Ingrid was describing to us, it is not a singular thing, it's a plural thing, but beyond it being a plural thing, it's an action. So it is what you do, what you say. The words are already a part of you. They are your Wanga. The mental intention that goes into the words are also a part of your Wanga. The thing, the science that is operating from the space of Obeah is the act that happens after your thoughts and your words attach to the power of your action. I'm looking at Obeah as mycelium. Mycelium is the network of fine white filaments that grow out of the base of mushrooms. So they basically look like connectors. These long, spindly tendrils spread everywhere like spun sugar, communicating and sharing nutrients with plants and trees, eating organic matter that has died, and decomposing old substances in primordial building blocks of matter that can be shaped into new life forms. Mycelium clean and transform the natural world by breaking down organic matter and making its raw materials available again for use in the ecosystem. In many ways, mycelia are the missing link in the cycle of life and death. Obeah, as a spiritual technological network under various aliases, supports and validates the growth and protection of African spiritual aesthetic, language, creation, and destruction. Obeah in many ways performs as mycelium, a common connector in a number of African spiritual practices. In Kalinda, we have Obeah and we have Wanga. So there's a lavway that goes, send the Obeah, send all the Obeah you buy for me. Send the Obeah you buy for me. I'm born in the cemetery. Send the Obeah, send all the Obeah you buy for me, and crying, oh Lord, oh Lord, oh Lord, send the Obeah, send all the Obeah you buy for me. So the lavoi has several meanings, just as our spiritual technologies do. So the intention behind my chanting or my singing will then give a particular result. So if I'm saying to somebody, or not singing, but actually saying to the person, send the Obeah you buy for me, I'm telling them that whatever magic that you might put forward, whatever sorcery that you are holding, whatever witchcraft that you think you have, send it my direction, because my Obeah is so strong that it is born inside of me. It is not something external to my body, so I don't have to pick it up. It walks with me as a shadow, as a jambi. What's interesting to me about the words Obeah and Wanga are that they both serve as instruments of resilience. I use the word resilience as opposed to resistance because resistance for me speaks to a certain kind of trauma. So while we might have been responding in a particular way to what was happening in slavery, we already had these different Obeah technologies, Wanga technologies residing inside of our bodies and our space. So it allowed us a mode of morality, a mode of ethics, a mode of communication, a mode of power, and a way to regenerate our life force energy. So if we look at the first three letters, OBE, as opposed to the OBI, you would get an acronym that comes out to be an outer body experience. So being involved in Obeah practice, you are dealing with something that is beyond your physical. You are connecting to the divine power outside of this space. You are crossing what in Bakongo thought is called the Kalunga line, so a body of water, the sea. So your energy is reaching past that line, reaching past liminal space, reaching past the crossroads. The Wanga speaks to the waning of the moon or the dark moon, which in Kalinda, a lot of our rituals are done around that time. Again, you're seeing the connection to the earth, to nature, to the ancestors, to us as mirrored cells, even sitting inside of the Zoom, to us as community. So while it can be an individualistic practice, we are definitely still connected because of where it came from, where all of these different roots, these pieces of mycelium would connect things like Orisha, would connect things like hoodoo inside of New Orleans, would connect things like Wanga in Central Africa, in Haiti, in New Orleans. That word shows up throughout scholarship and history for various things. In blues music and jazz music, there is a story of a blues musician that actually has the word Wanga inscribed on his guitar. So you ask yourself, how does a word like Wanga that is inside of Kalinda's complex in Trinidad and Tobago move from possibly Haiti to Trinidad all the way to New Orleans? It was riding under the guise of the Congo thought, right? So Congo people, which is something that we don't actually focus on. A lot of times when we think about our spiritual technologies, we're very focused on West Africa being the source of where these technologies came from. And for me personally, just like with the word Obeah and what it connotes, it's the same thing of how West Central Africa has been left out of history in a particular sort of way, or we've been given it in little crumbs. Yeah. I'm going to read you a bit of something that I wrote from a paper called Playing in Tongues, and then we'll jump back over. Well, hopefully you're all following me so far. It's so very hard to talk to people. It doesn't feel very Obeah-ish when the cameras are off, but I guess it is very Obeah-ish in that way. So, thank you for turning your camera on. When I was a child, I saw my mother, Veronica Silver, and other church devotees engage in something called speaking in tongues. Speaking in tongues is the vocalization of a language that is unknown to the speaker. When my mother was speaking in tongues, there was always a plurality occurring. She would begin by singing a church hymn, accompanied by her hands clapping in a syncopated fashion. Her body would gradually erupt, scattering her feet, waist, arms, and eventually her unknown tongue arrived. I never gave it much thought because it was normal, a normal ritual in our lives. one that stayed in my memory in this way. Mommy spoke in tongues as an expression of ritual, perhaps even mass ritual, a way of multiplying the lived experience beyond any singular moment. I can speculate that it happened even when known or unknown eyes or also existing energetic forms interacted or connected with her being. The genesis of her evolution in tongues did not require space, place, or time, or so it appeared. It seemed only to consider her vulnerability to be accessible, her creativity to be available, and her body willing to be the thought and action of these tongues. The church, the first place I witnessed the symphony of her identity, was not the only place. It was also found it also found its way into her home while she was cleaning the house, listening to her gospel records, simultaneously praying and praising her God. The proliferation of her tongue took shape wherever she was and whenever she entered the process of liminality. So this example I'm giving you of my mommy is straight Obeah for me. My mother would take oil and wipe down the doorways after she finished cleaning her house down. For me as a child watching her clean, it was annoying because it's like, mommy wants you to clean your house, so you're thinking it's a chore. Not until I got into my 20s did I understand it as a spiritual act. That cleaning her house was a way of cleaning her spirit. That cleaning her house was a way of cleaning her children. That cleaning her house was a way of creating some sort of an orb in space around the building that we lived in. Anointing us before we went to school in the morning, anointing us before we went to bed at night. These were things that were guards, or in Bakongo words, inkisis, that she would use to heal and protect us. So Obeah for me has never been something that is necessarily negative, but it's the word sound power of what the colonizer has taught us is why we fear things. They were in charge of what was considered to be dangerous. The ordinances that Pastor Ingrid spoke of, the first set of laws that are recorded are in Santo Domingo in January 6, 1522. And these laws came after a slave rebellion, quote unquote. I say rebellion as opposed to, again, using the word resistance. Yes, there was something being resisted, but these people were also in a space of thriving and not just surviving for the situation they had been placed inside. I don't use the word slaves, I use the word hostages because the colonizers are criminals. So we have to call things what they were. They were in charge of linguistics and how the meaning of those linguistics played out inside of space. So it left little room for us to devise what we say something is. However, that's changed now. We are able to write, we are able to get on social media, we are able to share information with each other. So we can now reclaim words and make new meanings out of them. Everybody with me still? It was a lot, that was a mouthful. Y'all can unmute and talk to me. I don't mind you speaking to me directly.
Yes, we are with you.
Awesome.
So what is known or labeled and often criminalized as Obeah may also be the network from which many other African systems developed in the New World. This is, of course, lending to the notion that Obeah served in a great upper hand in the formation of African Christianity. So we have this thing that we do all the time where it is that, Christianity is the thing that enslaved us. So while that can be true, it will also have to be true that while Christianity was something that invaded our Africanness would have simultaneously invaded Christianity. Yeah, it's very evident inside of the saints, but beyond the saints, it's evident inside of our communion. It's inside of our Thanksgiving practices. It's inside of our writing down of prayers or spelling in any way. What is spelling, right? When we write, we are performing magic. You are changing word into a particular action, yeah? And then that action becomes powerful once you set a particular intention that goes with it. Because all that's needed to create magic is your body, is that intention, and is the word, right? So we look at a scripture, in the beginning was the word, and the word was with God, and the word was God, right? Who is the word inside of that? So for the sake of this talk, the word for me becomes the Wanga. So if the Wanga was with God and the Wanga was God, that means that we are the word. So we are the Obeah, we are the Wanga, we are the magic. So how can you destroy something that is the thing? So within the crux of slavery and colonization, it becomes very difficult for the slave master to exact their plan in the way that they thought. Because very easily, okay, we're realizing they're rebelling, they're resisting us, we can't get them to really calm down. So we're going to make these laws that say that all of their practices, playing drums, singing, horns, bells, anything that will bring these energies they bring into space. But the reality is they weren't that bright. They actually didn't know that any of these things were making things happen. They still didn't understand, because the banning of the drum, the banning of the practice of Obeah, they failed to realize that the Obeah was not something external to us, but it was us. So when I hold my bois in my hand as a stick fighter, my bois is not a piece of wood. It is a living thing. It comes from a tree. It is then divine with who is making the bois. So if I go and I cut the tree and I make my bois, now my energy is fused with the tree's energy, and then it's fused with the actual instrument that I'm using to step into a place of war. Yeah, it can also be a place of peace, depending on what my kalinda practice means to me. Inside of that divination of that rod, it becomes a wand. It wanes and it wards energy, and it intercepts energy, and it clears the space, right? So it is a work of the wand. It is a work of a sword. So see where I'm at. I see people in the chat, so that's good. I'm glad y'all following me. I'm totally off my slides here. They have, I'm going to read one of the laws that actually came up. So there's several of them between 1522 and still to this day. There are strict Obeah laws. What I find interesting about the Obeah laws that occurred in Trinidad is that they would have started in the early 1800s. There would have been another one that was put in place in 1868. But what they did was they disguised it. So half the time when they had vagrancy laws, if they had vagabond laws, those were all Obeah laws. They had laws that you could not throw garbage or dirt outside on a footway, basically a crossroad, right? So they saw these things happening, but what I cannot help but to think about is that these practices, these technologies were coming from secret society. So I don't think that our ancestors are slow on any level. I believe that they released enough or allowed the colonizers to see enough of the practice so that a certain level of fear could be implemented, in the same way that they made the word Obeah a word of danger. Because if they say that the word is dangerous or this thing is dangerous, now who then becomes in charge of getting rid of the danger, right? So if we put a certain amount of fear inside of the space, who now has to quell the fear? The colonizer can't do it. The same people that you're trying to ban from doing these things, you now have to quell the fear. Or you use it for your own advantage, which they did at several different terms. See if I can see this here. Right, so, sorry, I just want to get this up a bit long. If it shall be shown upon the oath of a creed, hold on. If it shall be shown upon the oath of a credible witness that there is reasonable cause to suspect that any person is in possession of any article or thing used by him in the practice of Obeah or witchcraft, it shall be lawful for any justice of the peace by warrant under his hand to cause any place whatsoever belonging to or under the control of such person to be searched, either in the day or in the night. And if any such article shall be found in any place, so search to cause the same to be seized and brought before him or some other justice of the peace, who shall cause the same to be secured for the purpose of being produced in evidence in any case in which it may be required. So a lot of words to basically say, I don't want y'all moving around too much. Anything that looks like it's Obeah related, don't have it outside your house because I could bring you in court, up on court charges. Every person who shall blow any horn or use any other noisy instrument for the purpose of calling persons together or of announcing any show or entertainment or the purpose of hawking or distributing any articles whatsoever, or of obtaining money or alms, or which is calculated to frighten any horse or other cattle. So as you can see, they made mention of animals, they made mention of instruments, anything that they would have seen that looked like Obeah to them, or looked like this malpractice of healing, this malpractice of medicine, this malpractice. Sorry to cut you, but can I wind up in 2 minutes? Sure. You're not cutting me, no problem. The last thing I want to get to are the communication tools that we have. So what we're calling, again, Obeah could be the way that you speak to a person. It could be the way that you cook your food, the way that you answer your phone, the way that you write your love notes, the way that you hug your mother, the way that you hug your father. All those things can be considered Obeah if the right intentions are behind it. Yes? So communication tools inside of my practice of Kalinda, but not just my practice of Kalinda, in many different African spiritual technologies. We have dance or movement, which is our body and the action of our bodies. So we're talking about the wanga of our bodies. Song, word, sound, vocal action and intention. Percussion. So percussion is not necessarily always drums. It could be buckle and spoon. It could be tambu bamboo. I'm giving you all the things that have been inside of our space that are very Obeah related, and how we can put someone inside of a space of giddiness or in a space of trance. So the percussion is a spirit invocation because it's coming from the ancestral realm. It's also a spirit action. And then the works of wands and swords I explained about the boa. When we speak of communication tools, we speak of community, because the community needs communication tools, especially during a time of slavery and these different conditions of oppression. We would have needed ways of communicating beyond our word or what we know as the word. So the word could easily be the sound of the drum, the sound of the conch shell. When we speak of Obeah and Wanga, we are calling beyond our individual self. We are inside the call and response where all can be heard and all may speak and all may be spoken. So my last question is, what are we responding to when we speak of our spiritual technologies? Who or what are we obeying or obeying? So for me, it's really about how it is that we get to a point that we are no longer responding to what the colonizer says our practices are, and getting to a place where we remember, because Obeah, again, is memory, Wanga is a memory. How are we remembering? How are we re-engaging? How are we recommitting? And how are we reassembling ourselves through our different technologies? Thank you very much.
Thank you to.
Thank you very much, Jean. It's a pleasure to have you on with us tonight. We want to move quickly because time is fast running this evening. So I don't know if Ajay is ready to go. Let's go. Thank you.
Hi, I must say a pleasant evening to everyone.
firstly to Pastor Ingrid for allowing me this opportunity. You all hearing me good? Great.
Yes, we are. Yes, we are.
Yes, we are. Yes, we are.
Nice.
Yes, we hear you.
So thank you to Pastor Ingrid Ryan for affording me this opportunity. I tried to wiggle out of this one, but I wasn't successful. Right? To all the other viewers and participants, persons of various ranks, spiritual ranks, I say a pleasant evening. Well, when my bio was being read, it was mentioned that I'm a performance artist and I love to sing. So I will do a couple, it's short, not even a minute, I guess, in salutation to my ancestors. Shile kufua ulua. Shile kufua ulua. Shile kufua u. Iwaloniwa. Iwaloniwa. Masheta wanu Shile kufua Shile kufua Shile kufua. So what I said there, Shile ku, is Yoruba, that means open the door. And it's actually asking the divine creative energy to open the door unto us, the door of, richness, the door of good health, wealth, all good things of the universe. I ask for all of us here on this panel discussion, each and every one of us, today and all days ahead, as we go forward. When I heard the term, what is Obeah? I said, boy, I wonder if I could summarize all of this energy I have to speak on this subject matter in 20 minutes, because it is an exciting topic. It is one that allows me to share also my personal experiences. And for me, I have to say I'm pretty lucky to be going after Pastor Ryan and Jamie in that they would have touched a lot of the salient points and the explanation of the terms and the definition. And I don't want to be repetitious. It gives me a chance to share some different perspective. But again, just to touch the origin, and as Pastor Ryan would have said initially, how can you start to discuss something if you don't know the origin? And we talk about the Igbo people, right? The root word Obeah, meaning power. The Akan people, which Akan was from Ghana. And the word that was used there was Obaifu, that the Ashanti priests used, which meant magic. We had the Egyptian influence as well. In Trinidad and Tobago, the word Obeah came from, or they associated it with the Obeah butter, what we call Obi seed, right? The Obeah butter is the Yoruba word for kola nut, but we call it Obi seed. And the Obi seed is used for basic Ifa Orisha divination, right? Basic, because to get a full in-depth divination, we do what you call a dafa. Being a Ifa Orisha devotee, DAAFA, a dafa is what is used when one wants an in-depth consultation. So the Obeah butter is used as well, but for basic divination. So Obeah also derived from that word Obi, the Obi seed. And Pastor Ryan also, touched on definition of what is Obeah. And the first word that came up, of course, is evil, something that is evil, harnessing supernatural powers, healing, a system of healing. And if we looked at all the definitions of the word Obeah, and if you ask me, then each and every one of us belonging to some religious belief system practices Obeah. If we was to go by the definition of harnessing supernatural powers, healing system, whether you're using herbs or whatever you're using. Then all of us practicing Obeah. You know, what I discussed before, even with Pastor Ryan, is it the way that it is packaged? Because once it is African, once it comes from someone of an African belief system, African spirituality, whether it is Orisha, whether it is spiritual Baptist, it is maligned as evil. It is maligned as bad. But the said things that persons of African spirituality practice, I am seeing it being practiced with other belief systems, but they are not labeling it as Obeah. So is it the way it is packaged? And as I said, if we go back to the definition of the word Obeah, then, as I said, tooth moon, everybody practicing Obeah, right? So we need to look at that in a truthful manner. Let me share something with you all. As a child growing up, and one cannot deny that it had hearing the word Obeah had a very evil, it came across evil. It didn't resonate well. I remember as a child growing up, when I walk in the road with my parents, there was a particular house in the area used to always have Thanksgiving. I think it was back then I recognized my spirit gravitating to the drums, etc. When prayers going on by that particular house, I remember my mother used to take me and pull me across the other side of the road. Cross the road, in other words, cross the road, because those people practicing Obeah. And as a child growing up, I would hear it being discussed in the home, right? So I, as well as my cousins and other relatives, we develop a fear. We develop a fear for the people living in that household. And of course, there were children who attended school with me. I remember very well. We didn't want to have nothing to do with them because our parents told us they practice in Obeah. And that stayed with me. And so much so that sometimes, I want to go to Thanksgiving because other children in the village would be there and they get in the Thanksgiving bag, etc. But fixated in my mind is what my parents told me, that they practice in Obeah. And poor me at that stage, what I know about Obeah, I have no evidence. As Pastor Ryan asked, how you come to that conclusion? What evidence you have? What you saw? So imagine a little child having no evidence, but hating people more or less because of what you heard being bandied around in the household. And there is where the destruction starts with us in terms of self-hate as African people, not wanting to be aligned with anything of African spirituality. That is where it starts. You understand? And it wasn't somebody that didn't look like me who fed the information to me. It was one of my own kind. Even though it was a family member, it was not somebody that didn't look like me who was telling me to stay away from these people. And somebody saying you couldn't even look at the Obeah house. You couldn't, right? We had to walk our way straight. And as I grew older, and I'm fast forwarding the story, into a performance artist, that fear, somebody mic is not muted, that fear of being ostracized, being demonized, went with me even as a performance artist, that in my music, I never truthfully brought out all I felt. I'm a writer. I write my own music. A lot of times I would write my music and I say, nah, boy, I can't sing that, nah. I wonder how the rest of artists will look at me. Nah. And I would change up the words. I was not being true to myself for many years of my artistic career because of how, being associated with African spirituality made me felt. People know I'm of that belief system, and immediately all your people walking Obeah, and that traveled with me. and stayed with me for many years in my artistic career that robbed me of probably writing the best material or performing the best material. When we look at the definition of Obeah, as they say, harnessing supernatural powers and spirits, doing evil to others, spiritual healing is a mixture. And I said, when we look at that, then it is not just African people. The great Alex Crowley, who was an occultist, a spiritualist, even John Dee, they were persons who, it is documented, Queen Elizabeth the first consulted, they had people they would go to consult, to guide them spiritually. They would not do anything just like that, as we would say, by happenstance. The other cultures, they would go to these people and be guided spiritually on how to make the next move, what to do, etc. All these important factors of their lives. I have not heard anybody malign them and calling them Obeah man or Obeah woman. As a matter of fact, it is celebrated, it is published that they would meet with these spiritual advisors and they would be guided. But again, as Pastor Ingrid touched, once it is of African spirituality, we will malign. But I want us to understand something, and Jamie touched it. Intent. I always say people don't do things just so. Nobody does anything just like that. And back then, Obeah was a tool of resistance. It was a tool of resistance. We even heard about synchronization. The Africans, the enslaved Africans, came here undiluted with their way of worship. That's what they knew back then, undiluted way of worshiping God in their way. And in the Ifa Orisha system, we refer to God as Olodumare. It's Yoruba word meaning God. God is only but one energy that is referred to by many names. And they came here with their way of worship, undiluted. And of course, we know the story of the slave master forcing Christianity upon them. Not giving Christianity to them or allowing them to choose. It was forced upon them. And we must be sure to use the right words. It was forced upon them. So they had to survive. And brilliantly so, they synchronized. Using the Catholic saints. That is why today you have Saint Philomene, a Catholic saint that is likened unto Oshun. Oshun in the Orisha pantheon is that energy, that Orisha, that Imali that represents sweetness, the beautiful goddess associated with fertility, etc. Oshun is likened unto Saint Philomene in the Catholic faith. Even the colors in the diaspora here, they use pink to represent Oshun and both Saint Philomene. In Yoruba land, yellow is used. As a matter of fact, colors are not necessarily limited to Imales. It's not a practice that I would develop and I would advise anyone to develop, meaning limiting colors to energy, because we in the Ifa Orisha tradition believe that Orishas, which is not a religion, but they are energies of Olodumare. They represent the divine aspect of Olodumare. If God cannot be limited, then the energies associated with God cannot be limited either by colors, etc. We even have Yamonja. They synchronize Yamonja with Mother Sentence, what you will call Mother Sentence, which blue is the color that is used for Mother Sentence, and they skillfully synchronize. So when they thought they were worshiping Yamonja, Sentence rather, they were calling upon the Orishas. They were calling upon the Orishas, and rightfully so, they had to survive, right? That was wisdom. As they would say, playing dead to catch. But Obeah, the word Obeah and demonizing it was a deliberate, skillful act. It wasn't anything that happened by happenstance. To divide a people, to make us hate ourselves, to make us feel bad about ourselves up to today. When you conquer a person, as Pastor Ryan touched, mentally, that's it. The war is over. Once you conquer someone within their mind, then it's all over. So when you make a people feel that they are not worthy, that what they are doing is outdated, that is not associated with God, that is demonic, how do you want them to feel about themselves? And as they would say, a lot of people buy debate. a lot of people buy debate, and today, even we having this discussion, which is a step in the right direction, it will take a lot more to remove the stigmatization for persons of African religion and African origin to feel good about themselves. But one cannot bury their heads in the sand and turn a blind eye to the political intent, right? The socio and political intent of using the word Obeah to malign us. It was strategically done. It was well placed by doing that. It was well placed. How did Obeah end up in the law books? That wasn't by happenstance as well. Was well, it's a well-oiled machinery. As Jamie touched, if something is criminal and you practice it, then you become a criminal. And of course, we know laws, right? Breaking laws carries penalties. If you are going to break the law of the land, there are consequences. And up until 2000, Trinidad and Tobago, we still had this in our law books under the Summary Offences Act. In Jamaica, it is still there on their law books. So laws are put in place to govern, to keep you in line, to keep you in check. So when you put that in the law books, of course, persons are afraid. They walk in that thin and narrow line because they don't want to practice that which is within them. But I like what Jamie said. You looking for Obeah to be the physical, the implements, when it is what is within us as a people. The power of your words, that intent. There are persons who we would say, like sheep or goat mouth and me boy, somebody say something and look it happen. But that person didn't pick up any implement, any candle, they didn't ring any bell, they didn't throw any water, what they did was the power of their words. It manifests. Isn't that Obeah? A lot of people do that today, and they don't belong to the African spiritual system. As I said earlier, I believe it is how they want to malign us in terms of how it is packaged. So I made a joke with Pastor Ryan when she appeared on my talk show on Friday. I said, we have, there is I don't want to call the name of the church, but when I start to talk, I think everybody big and they have sense. It's a chain of churches throughout Trinidad and Tobago that tell you, bring the salt, we will pray over it. And you go home and you sprinkle it on the food, and it would, keep the family calm, and put the water by the TV, and then they have the cord that they tie around their hand, etc., etc. I have not heard or seen anything that says these people are practicing Obeah. And I'm amazed. It's laughable even that all what they are doing, because I would have started in the spiritual Baptist faith at age 19 years. I would have started in the spiritual Baptist faith. So the glass of water, we know the use of the glass of water and ringing the bell. And again, as I said, we would demonize. But yet nobody will pinpoint these chain of churches throughout Trinidad and Tobago as practicing Obeah. So what do we do now in the year 2022?
Oh, I say so myself.
I just heard if somebody said something. Or somebody might, okay, yes. We must not forget also that African spirituality preceded Christianity. there is a school of thought as if African spirituality, or what came here with the enslaved Africans, was after Christianity. Or no. We need to get our history correct, and we must make no apology for it. That's why I said it came here undiluted, and Christianity was forced upon us. We must teach, apart from all the panel discussions we are having. A salient point I want to make this evening is we must take the information to our children. It is laughable when adults, African adults or of African religion, speak the information, yet they do not want to share it with their children. I have friends who would say, look, I wait until they reach old. Yes, when they reach old enough, they go make a choice. I have a little difficulty with that. I don't understand allowing them, when they reach a certain age, to make the choice. Then the cycle continues. Because if we are not truthful to ourselves, to take the information to our children, to teach them the truth, then we're going to be having these panel discussions from now till the cow come home. And we need to be honest as African people, whether we are spiritual Baptists, whether we are Ifa Orisha. Once you're looking like me, your head bun up, as a friend said, you're still bun up your head. Once we fall into that category, they will continue to see us as people who walk in Obeah. Unless we decide, let us educate our children. Are we going into the school system? Religious instructions, RI. Is the African religion represented in the school system? Are we there? Are we given the truth? Are we teaching the children, or are we still afraid and on the outside? Because a lot of times the children are not even coming to church with us or coming to the shrine with us. I am taking a different perspective, as I said, because all the explanation and definition would have been shared. And I said, when I saw that I am going last, I said, well, that's a blessing in disguise. It leaves me to share my experiences. And to conclude, because I'm looking at the time, now as an Ifa Orisha devotee, coming to that realness, having the information, and finally being true to myself, it is expressed in my music. I no longer has that inhibition. I can have a meaningful discussion with persons who are ignorant and who have their own ideas of what Obeah or what our belief system represent. So that at this juncture in my life, it gives me that autonomy and that power, because I know my ancestors dwelling with me. They are giving me this energy and this sense of proudness, that I could share my experiences, that I could work with my Christian brothers and sisters and even of other faith and explain to them. I'm not saying I'm going to convert them, and that's not the intent. The intent, I don't think we are here to try to convert anybody, but we are asking for respect. We are asking for respect. We are asking that we are given an equal opportunity to practice our belief system as all other religions, because it is one God called by many names, diversities of gifts, diversities of belief system, but it is one God, and we are all God's children. This is my humble contribution. Ashe.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you for your words tonight. I'm not seeing Shepherdess Juliet.
I am here, Pastor. Yes. So it gives me good pleasure to introduce this evening. We do have a special guest, and he is Ben Fossen, and he's the Associate Professor, Department of Religious Studies at the University of Texas at Austin. So, Assistant Professor Fossen, we will turn to you.
Thanks so much, and thanks to Pastor Ingrid for organizing this, and really an honor to be on a panel with such articulate other panelists. So it really brought a smile to my face to see this event and to see this work being done. My own research on Obeah is based on 15 years of research in Trinidad. And I just wanted to briefly point out some of the continuing ways that discrimination against Obeah has continued in the 21st century. And so I'll talk about a couple of those cases, one in Canada and one in Antigua. And I also wanted to point out that there are efforts underway, for example, in Jamaica to decriminalize Obeah that have been going on for years. And so these are really important struggles that are ongoing. In the question of what is Obeah, it's a question that my book publisher tried to force me to answer. And on the one hand, I think it's important to answer that question, but on the other hand, part of Obeah's power is its ability to resist that question to some extent. And certainly that's something that can be celebrated about Obeah. Obeah is certainly spiritual work. Obeah is a technology of justice making. In my own research, this came to the fore following in Trinidad and Moruga, where I do field research in Moruga. The police were paid to assassinate someone. 3 people borrowed their car, and the police shot up the car and killed 2 women and 1 man who were all innocent, unarmed. And so following these killings and the protests, what I found was that Obeah was used in a positive sense as a source of justice that was outside of but could affect the state justice system in a case where it seemed unlikely that the police would be prosecuted, but they were arrested. And so Obeah and the rituals surrounding the deaths of these 3 people really brought the positive meanings of Obeah as justice making to the forefront. And I even found people who might normally dissociate from Obeah in other contexts that were positively avowing that word. And so I think it's also important to recognize that people's attitudes are complex, and that people have a multiplicity of meanings of Obeah that can be engaged in different contexts. I think Obeah is also an experimental tradition. And so that goes back to this question of Obeah's complexity, its multiplicity. And I love the multifaceted diamond example. And I think, again, this is something that could be celebrated. A lot of times scholars see this as a problem. They're trying to define Obeah. They're trying to define it as something, and they're like, well, there's no standard, ritual or something like that. Well, there are standard things that are done, but Obeah is also an experimental tradition, and it could be celebrated that spiritual workers are able to use to good effect a diversity of sources of inspiration. And this, it makes sense in the fact that Trinidad is a complex place, the Caribbean is a complex place, that Obeah would reflect that complexity. Also in the process of spiritual work, spiritual workers see a diversity of clients. For example, in Moruga, it's well known that Indo-Trinidadian Hindus are some of the main clients of African spiritual workers. And so spiritual workers treat a diversity of clients, and it could be celebrated that there's an ability to do this and to engage a diversity of sources. We celebrate that with Western science, the ability to use diverse sources and come up with new discoveries. Why not celebrate it with Obeah science? And in the book, I talk about this question of Obeah being science and really taking that seriously. And so Obeah is also science. Obeah is definitely justice making. And I think in the Lavwe from the previous presentation, there's also a sense of Obeah being a discourse on power, and sometimes that can recognize that power could be used to harm or could be misused. But all discourses on power, to my knowledge, recognize the possibility that power could be misused. And so this idea of somebody sending Obeah against one, but then having a more powerful obeah that could counteract that is really common in a number of songs about obeah. And so I think that obeah is also a way to talk about power, a philosophy of power. And in that sense, it's entirely normal for there to be a recognition that power could be misused or ambivalent. So obeah is healing. And so I think obeah, I love this multifaceted diamond dimension to obeah, and its ability to resist definition to some extent is one of its powers. I wanted to point toward a couple of cases, and I'll just be brief because I want to give time for discussion of continuing persecution of obeah today. And so one case is in 2017 in Antigua that I write about in the epilogue to the book, where 3 men from India were arrested and then deported for allegedly practicing obeah. And so in Antigua, there's still anti-obeah laws on the books. And these men were guest workers, were practicing some form of Hindu astrological consultation, but were accused of practicing obeah. And so this is one of the dangers of the negative discourses of obeah, is that in the way that it was criminalized under colonial laws, it was a category that was so broad that it could be used against a variety of different people in anything, not just anything, because it mattered from what class of society one was from. And so this shows how obeah was used to deport these men in 2017. And it kind of triggered a national debate around whether obeah should still be criminalized in Antigua and Barbuda. Another case is in Canada, which doesn't have anti-obeah laws. And there's a Supreme Court case in which a police officer impersonated an obeah man in order to elicit a confession from a Jamaican Canadian woman against her own sons and adopted sons. This led to her own family being imprisoned and herself being imprisoned. And the crux of the matter in the Supreme Court case was how could they permit this confession obtained by a religious practitioner when they would never do so with a Catholic confession, for example, with the religious confession being not permissible as religious evidence, as being kind of sacred in that way. The court granted that obeah was a religion, but said it was that the obeah in question wasn't moral. And so then this shows the kind of the double standard that obeah is put under. And I call it the moral racial kind of foundations of how religion has been categorized and defined under colonial and post-colonial laws. And so there's, even when there's not an explicit anti-obeah law in the case of Canada, this kind of moral racial discrimination can still lead to obeah not being granted the protections of a religion. And so these cases show that negative attitudes towards obeah continue to have very real and profound effects. And this panel has been a wonderful intervention that in that kind of revaluing obeah on its own terms. Again, not trying to make it into something that looks like maybe what the colonizer wanted it to be, but something on its own terms. And so again, I think the diversity of obeah could be celebrated, and we could look to other religions. A Christian from one part of the world and a Christian from another part of the world might not recognize all of each other's rituals. I've heard that the same thing from a Vodou practitioner in Haiti, where he'll go to a temple on another part of the island and he won't recognize everything they're doing. I think that's also obeah being held up to a double standard in terms of defining it. So that's all I have. Again, thanks so much for everyone who's put this panel together and everyone who's participated tonight.
Thank you very much, Professor Fossey. I believe we just had 2 questions in the chat. First, I don't know if you want to go straight into questions, and we'll probably close off by 9:30. Yes?
Yes, agreed.
Okay, so there are only two questions. Okay, so one of the questions was sent to me personally was what's the name of the book that was written by Professor Foston? And the name of the book is Experiments with Power, Obeah and the Remaking of Religion in Trinidad. Yes, I will put the name in the chat so you can have the name of the book.
Oh, thank you. I was not good. I saw a repeat.
So from somebody named Nandi, given everything you have said relative to the shackles that robbed us of our African essence, please explain why then is Christianity still a part of Obeah or the spiritual Baptist?
Now, the spiritual Baptists accepted Christ as the Savior. Okay, and it's important to understand how we accepted Christ. Now, remember, the job of the colonizer was to convert. And when we accepted Christianity, we accepted it with our African selves. Okay, and that has happened all over the world. People accept when you look at what happened in Latin America. Okay, the Catholic Church was accepted by the people who were living there, the indigenous people of the place. But I always remind myself of when Pope John Paul went to Latin America on a tour. He was surprised at how they practiced Catholicism. They accepted it, okay, as Amerindian people, okay, in their culture. And so, and that's why I used the example last night of how in Nigeria, there is a Nigerian Chasuble. Okay, that's and so that people accepted. And remember that Christianity is an old religion. Okay, and in fact, I certainly believe that Christ died a long time ago. Okay, and when Christ is described in the Bible, he's described as having woolly hair. Okay, and so that we believe that what we get is what was always ours. When we become Christian, it was always ours in that he is one of us. Okay, and I want us to understand the concept of, it is important to understand the concept of religion, or of all people in the world, every human being believe there is a power greater than them. There is a power in charge of the universe. Whatever they call it, there is a power who is in charge of the universe, a maker of the universe. And for those of us who are Christians, we believe that maker is represented by Jesus the Christ. For those who are Hindus, they believe that maker is whoever. And so it depends on it is what we believe in. The fundamental thing is that there is a power greater than us. That it was made by somebody. There was a creator who created. In fact, when you look at the first story in the Bible, you will see that story being it's a very ancient story about the beginning of the world. That didn't start with Christianity. That first story in the Bible, it didn't start with Christianity. It is believed, and so when you look at the Assyrians and the people who came before, okay, the ancient Near East, you would see that story as part of their life and their living, because all beings that are human beings believe that there's a force. We believe that is represented by Jesus Christ. And so it's okay. What we need to know is that it is okay. Whatever you call him, like I tell people, you know, from what my reading, you don't have to call him Jesus, because Jesus is the letter J didn't exist when Jesus was born. The letter J didn't exist. Okay, and so whatever you call him, you recognize him as the supreme power, as the creator of the universe, and you pay obeisance to whoever you see as the supreme power of the universe. And that's why I say, we say every knee will bow, but it have millions of languages in the world. Some that don't have those letters in it, and it's okay. That's my response. Oh.
Okay, so I hope Nandi that's fine with you. The second question came from Marsha W. Does this mean that the Indian woman in the village that you took your child to when she was not well, and then she massaged and rubbed them down, as we see, was she then working Obeah?
Jerry,
Yes.
Jerry, go carry the child for Jerry.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, it is, we came here, all of us, especially ancient peoples of the world, with our abilities, and because we believed, those who light us, that's what we're doing is wrong. Okay, what we're doing is evil. And so those are skills that we have lost. As a child, I knew, and you go by one of these people, and they will cup. When children have bad cold or their lungs are infected, they will cup, and that same cup is being used, that same cupping, where you cup in and you draw the inflammation out of the lungs. That was, it came back with COVID. They began using that ancient way of removing mucus from the lungs called cupping. That was used to get that in the village. You know the man who is to the Jerry, you go there and all those things happen. Nobody wants us to buy out the whole pharmacy now. Today we
Cupping is part of physical therapy. I do cupping as part of my physical therapy.
Yeah, it is an
Yes.
old art. It is an
Yes.
old art that was carried on when I grew up in the East Indian community. It also happened in some African parts of the community, but that was something that they did. And of course, Jerry, to get rid of what they call blight and bad eye. They say the baby only vomiting. That don't let them people with their bad spirit touch the baby. Don't let them kiss your baby because the baby just sick. And so you carry by the pundit to Jerry the baby. Yes, shepherdess. You don't hear what
Those were the only two questions.
I have plenty pharmacy now.
Those were the only two questions.
Price about. Now they have plenty. Yes, sorry.
We do have some comments. The same comment that you made, Pastor, that a lot of people who condemn Obeah look for Obeah in night.
Yeah.
A lot of people are saying that they are thankful for the explanations because they have learned a lot of things. And as a matter of fact, one person said that she grew up in a household where her parents were practitioners and she was confused about what was happening in the house. I have one comment here by, is it Mansa Bekhan? Religion are the leaves, Obeah are the roots. Yeah. A lot of people saying thank you for sharing. I didn't say what was the name, the name of the book. And one person asked, so where do we go from here?
Well, this is a discussion series. Okay, our intention, the Academy of Grace job is to intellectualize our spiritual experiences in the Spiritual Baptist faith. And we continue, and we are about educating the public. Our focus is, of course, members of our faith tradition, making sure that they are well tooled to be able to manage the people who God has put under their charge. But we also offer training to people outside the Spiritual Baptist faith tradition. We, like, for example, at the end of this year, there's a course we call Spiritual Baptist Spirituality, where we work on honing the senses, because that's how you practice the art. That's how you develop the skills, by honing your senses. Because every one of the senses that we have, smell, taste, touch, there is a way to smell spiritually, to taste spiritually, because that's how you are able to navigate and to draw information from the spiritual realm. And we have a course that we do at the end of this year. Okay, that is a practical course in developing our spiritual senses. And so people could look out for us for information about that particular course. I want to say thank you.
Okay, I just have one comment. One person wants to know, okay, so she's saying that her parents didn't practice it in the home, but her father believes that somebody had put, I believe it's the evil spirit on him, and they want to know, how do you know if that is in fact what happened?
A spiritual worker can tell you that, who can discern that. A spiritual worker can discern that. Okay, and so that the same way we talk about the same, it could be positive. Like in fact, Crosso talks that in his book, how it could be both positive and negative. Okay, there's and so that you could, there's something that you could do to remove it, and there's something that you could do to hurt people. It is like the same way I said, you could go to the doctor for healing, and you could end up dead. Okay, you could go in a doctor's office for healing, and you could be going to give you the wrong medication. Okay, and that okay, so that it is what life is. You could use what is something is for good or for evil.
Thank you very much, Pastor. So now we pass back to Ms. Goodman to give us her closing remarks. We hope you have enjoyed. Somebody asked if I would put the email address. I will put the email address, and Pastor, if it's okay, can I put your contact number on because your contact number is number on the flyer, so that persons would be able to contact. As a matter of fact, persons are asking how they can contact the panelists other than on this forum. So what I indicated is that we will contact through the Academy of Grace, and the Academy of Grace will contact the presenters, because we don't know if they would want a lot of people just having their information outside here. So we will have to get permission for us to share the information, and so therefore we will handle it from our point of view at the Academy of Grace, and then we will ask them if they can share their information with you. So that information is forthcoming. Mr. Mann, back to you.
Thank you very much. What an evening. Thank you, panel members. Certainly informative, certainly intriguing session we've had. And I know this is the beginning of many, many more. We appreciate your frankness and, of course, the wealth of information that was shared. So I feel that we are more informed, we are more enlightened going forward. So now I want to invite Mr. Peter Green, librarian for our Heritage Library Division, to give the vote of thanks. Is Peter there? Okay, so is Peter's not there?
Here. Debbie, I'm here.
Great. Thank you. Go ahead, Peter.
Okay, good evening all. It is my extreme pleasure to close out this evening's activities by saying thank you. Truly it has been, right, a very enlightening discussion on the topic of Obeah. Some myths have been dispelled and some truths have been revealed. Okay, I want to first say thank you to Ms. Debbie Goodman, the manager of corporate communications of NALIS, for leading us through tonight's program. Okay, thank you also to Pastor Ryan Rubin and other members of the Academy of Grace, Institute of Holy Spirit, for broaching this topic to NALIS as we celebrate Spiritual Baptist Liberation Day. This was indeed a timely discussion. Okay, thank you to Ms. Jasmine Simmons, my director at Heritage Library Division, for your insightful welcome remarks as the offering by NALIS on the topic of Obeah, as well as on the Spiritual Baptist faith. Right? Please be sure to visit our exhibition on the second floor, the National Library building, and online at our HLD Facebook page. Thank you to Deaconess Janice Bridges for your stimulating introduction on the topic and our talented moderator. Next, thank you to Shepherdess Judith Forbes for leading us expertly through this panel discussion. This mission, right, was well accomplished. Thank you to the members of the panel, Ms. Jamie Filbert, next, Ms. Aya Soren Bernard, and Professor Ryan Rubin for increasing our understanding of Obeah and all its nuances in African spirituality. Okay, thank you for imparting your individual perspectives / knowledge on the subject matter. Again, thank you to the audience members, the general public of Trinidad and Tobago, for your questions, they were well thought of and provoking and stimulated much discussion. Thank you to Ms. Paula Green, our director, our executive director at NALIS, for allowing the HLD, Heritage Library Division, to participate in this forum. Thank you again to the hardworking staff of the Heritage Library Division for preparing the space for the exhibition and assisting in preparation for this event. Thank you, as always, to the eager and efficient staff of the PR Marketing Department of NALIS. And lastly, thank you and good night. And to all, have a blessed, safe, joyous, spiritual Shout Baptist celebration tomorrow at your various churches. Thank you again, and a pleasant good night to all. Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you very much, Peter. And I wish to leave the following words by Roy Bennett with you as we commemorate Spiritual Baptist Day tomorrow. And he says, your hardest times often lead to your greatest moments of life. So keep going. Through situations, build strong people in the end. So let me read it again. So your hardest times often lead to the greatest moments in your life. And so keep going. And tough situations build strong persons in the end.